Robservations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your evangelist of the imagination, and still yet undefined, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I am, of course, robcasting at you. You imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations, the show about something. Robservations, episode number 705. And today, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, however you identify across these 28 known galaxies, is a very special show. It's a very special day. And we're here to talk about one of the foundational cornerstones that made you an imagination connoisseur. And that is, of course, the great, timeless, dare I say, one of the most perfect movies ever made, Raiders of the Lost Ark, which turns 40 years old today. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Back in the day, I'm sure you were wondering, gosh, I saw Clash of the Titans, I saw For Your Eyes Only, I saw Excalibur a couple of months back. What am I going to see next? Well, we're going to talk about that. What you got to see was the first collaboration between Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I have to say, now, if you take yourselves back, what was so interesting about this was no one really knew what this movie was about. Even if you saw the trailer, I'm like, is this about Noah's Ark? Is this about a space ark? Why would they rate it? I mean, it was really difficult. I read Starlog religiously. I read Cinefantastique. I read famous, fantastic films. I read everything, and I still couldn't tell what the hell is this movie about. And when I saw the film, I went to a public sneak of this movie. They did this in the day. They wanted to generate word of mouth, so they would show these films before they opened, usually a week or two. I don't remember if it was a week or 2 weeks, but it was playing with another movie. So you'd go see another movie, and in the case for me, it was Excalibur, which I'd already seen, and I wasn't as big a fan of that movie at the time as I am now, but me and like 6 of my friends, of course, we're all Star Wars fans and Close Encounters fans and Jaws fans, and come on, Spielberg and Lucas teaming up, this was like the greatest thing in the world, but we still didn't know what the hell this movie was about. Well, we all went, and we breathlessly left the theater shook. That's the only word I can come up with. It blew away. It surpassed any expectation I might have had, not knowing what I was going to get. And I have to say, this film was one of the single greatest movie-going experiences I ever had in a theater. Now, you know how I love to read articles. I'm going to read a little article that was published today in the Guardian newspaper in the UK before I'm bringing on 2 esteemed guests. A production illustrator, Darren R. Doctorman, who's been working in the motion picture industry since the late 80s. I mean, the man worked on The Abyss, for God's sake. And then, of course, well, the Steven Spielberg of special features, Charlie Lazzarica, who is a director in his own right. He directed the film Crave, but he also made some of the greatest documentaries ever. You can see his work in the Alien Anthology and maybe his masterpiece, the Blade Runner 5-disc set that has his definitive documentary, Dangerous Days, on it. I'm very privileged to have these gentlemen joining me. And before we get started, I just wanted to read this article very quickly. Raiders of the Lost Ark at 40. Indiana Jones's first adventure remains his greatest. Scott Tobias wrote this for The Guardian. It was published today at 2:07 in the morning Eastern Daylight Time. It took almost no time, certainly not the 40 years since it was released, for Steven Spielberg's Raiders of the Lost Ark to become the new standard of adventure films, surpassing the crude matinee serials that inspired it and shrewdly building on previous models like The Adventures of Robin Hood and the John Huston, Humphrey Bogart team-ups The Treasure of Sierra Madre and The African Queen. Its influence on culture was immediate and widespread, most directly on knockoffs both skilled, Romancing the Stone, and not so skilled, Alan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold, and across every commercial medium that could capitalize on it. The Atari 2600 game Pitfall was a personal favorite. Many more tombs have been raided in the decades since. Raiders became a box office phenomenon in 1981, including sequels of variously diminished returns. But none has recreated the same level of excitement and magic, and most have taken away the wrong lessons from it. The first lesson is, be Steven Spielberg, which is understandably difficult for other filmmakers to manage, since there can be only one director with his deft, seemingly intuitive feel for image making and storytelling on a large scale. The second lesson is trickier, because attempting to replicate the bigness of Raiders, its globe-trotting locales, its historical backdrop, its wall-to-wall action sequences, misses nearly everything that makes it great. As with all Spielberg films, the least expensive touches are the most significant. Granted, a few of the more lasting images from Raiders cost a lot of money, like the bookends of Harrison Ford's archaeological adventure or Indiana Jones outrunning a giant boulder in the first action sequence, and the stop-motion face melting of a Nazi supervillain as God punishes him for his hubris. But more often, Spielberg's gift for lighting and framing, reaction shots, and visual sleights of hand make the deepest impression. The opening dissolve from the Paramount logo to a South American mountaintop, the soft glow light emanating from a coveted idol, Indy's unmistakable shadow darkening the doorway of his ex-lover's bar in Nepal, the sunset silhouette of an archaeological dig in Cairo, the sly comedy of the villain's medallion-scarred hand revealing itself with a Sieg Heil salute, and on and on and on. As much as any Spielberg film before or since, Raiders of the Lost Ark is a pure exercise in style, an assemblage of can you top this action set pieces held together by a thin tissue of old-fashioned romance and historical hokum. Of course, the hokum is of the highest quality. George Lucas and Philip Kaufman wrote the story, Lawrence Kasdan's sparkling dialogue, but the film feels in every way like Spielberg and friends creating the type of adventure they would have enjoyed as children, drawn from forgotten serials or comics, or treasured scenes from Only Angels Have Wings or Gunga Din or various sword and sorcery epics. It's the most sophisticated possible rendering of unsophisticated material, juvenilia done with peerless craft. The quotation marks around the film, along with its boyish spirit, allow the audience to accept a cartoonish vision of the world and of history that would otherwise seem baldly xenophobic. From this perspective, Jones is not a ruthless plunderer of other countries' treasures, but a dashing intellect on a mission to unearth precious antiquities for public study. And the indigenous masses and sword-wielding goons who chase after him in South America and Cairo are of a type, too, that are abstracted from sources other than reality. Still, the famous gag of a skilled Arab swordsman confronting Indy in the marketplace, only for our hero to casually blow him away, feels more than a little sinister in its implications. The Nazis certainly have it coming, however, as does Indy's duplicitous French rival Belloc, played by Paul Freeman, who deploys the effective strategy of letting him do the hard work before taking his treasures away. Spielberg's previous film, the calamitous action comedy 1941, tried to wring the Second World War for body entertainment, and Raiders is a much more streamlined effort to do the same, as clean and satisfying as a punch square in a henchman's jaw. For the same director to make Schindler's List 12 years later, replacing the cackling stereotype of a Gestapo agent with a Nazi camp lieutenant, Ralph Fiennes, of more multidimensional sadism, seems like an improbable evolution, but the two films do feel connected by the spiritual desecration of Nazism, here represented by a sacred prize, the Ark of the Covenant, that Hitler wants to deploy as a weapon of unimaginable occult power. By nature, Raiders allows itself to consider the war in the simplest possible terms, framing Nazism as a crime against God, as profane and hubristic and evil. Film history seems to be speaking through him in Raiders of the Lost Ark, which harnesses all he's learned about westerns, swashbucklers, sword and sandal epics, and war adventures. 40 years later, it's still an education. Now, that was a truncated version of the article, which I'm going to put into the live chat if you'd like to read it. It's a pretty good article, I think. So here you go. And now, without further ado, I'm going to bring on Darren Doctorman and Charlie Lazarica. Gentlemen, welcome to Robservations, episode 705. It's Indiana Jones' birthday, and I couldn't think of two better people to celebrate it with than the two of you. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we all belong in a museum at this point.
I guess I would ask the two of you to tell us about the first time that you saw Raiders. I guess, Charlie, I read you did you wrote a pretty good post on Facebook today. When did you first discover Indiana Jones?
The first time I laid eyes on Indiana Jones was actually at a science fiction convention in 1980 down at LAX, and they were giving out these flyers promoting Raiders, which at the time I wasn't 100% sure what it was. I hadn't heard of it really because we didn't have the internet back then. We didn't,
right.
Starlog was pretty much the internet in terms of what was coming up, right? And Raiders wasn't exactly science fiction. It wasn't, didn't quite fit as far as we knew that kind of genre publication. So anyway, it eventually did. But that's all I saw was this flyer, and I saw Harrison Ford with a really close cropped haircut and a hat that I thought he was a cowboy and a western. I thought I don't know what this is. I don't know if I care. And like you said, is it Noah's Ark? What kind of ark? What's the ark? I didn't know. Right. I didn't know anything what they're trying to sell. Right.
Right.
But then the trailer came out, and the trailer was fantastic. I thought, okay, this looks fun, but I still wasn't 100% sold
because it wasn't science fiction. Right. It wasn't Star Wars. I think we were waiting for something, the two of them coming together. Was it a hybrid of Close Encounters and Star Wars?
And between Star Wars, Empire, Superman, Alien, Star Trek: The Motion Picture, we were all thinking in a sci-fi, kind of like honeymoon phase. Raiders didn't quite fit that. So about a month or a few weeks before the movie came out, my dad got a hold of the LP of the soundtrack, and he gave it to me. And of course, at that point, I was well aware of John Williams. I was a huge, huge fan, so I put it on very excitedly. And the theme was so upbeat and let's go off to adventure, and it was just like this kind of fun thing I was not expecting exactly, but it was so hummable, like you could just hum it all day long. And I thought, oh wow, that's great. So then I finally saw it. I saw it June 13th, which would be 40 years ago from tomorrow, at the Man Chinese Theater in Hollywood with my dad.
Oh.
And it was one of those 5 or 6 religious experiences you have as a movie fan, where you go into the theater and you're just ready to be whisked away. And the film not only does that, it does it 100 times, 1,000,000 times better than you could have ever imagined. I mean, just every second of that film was an amazing discovery of some kind, whether it was the story, the plot, the character, or the cinematography, the editing, the music, the craft of it. Literally every moment of Raiders was just like this beautiful, amazing discovery that I was enthralled the entire time, and enthralled with a smile on my face. And the last thing I'll say before Darren takes over, I think the moment I remember most about that first screening was when Indy shoots the Arab swordsman, right? That was a big, the whole place went nuts because of how sort of simple it was. Like, oh yeah, why didn't you just do that, right? But I remember my dad was kind of I wouldn't say a disciplinarian, but he was kind of stern. He was very formal about things. And I had to look to my dad for a second as if to say, is it okay if I cheer? Because the entire theater is cheering. And he's like, yes. He's like, go ahead. And I was like that. So it was like this weird moment of Raiders just allowing so much awesome into my life. That was such a great day for me.
Darren, what about you?
Well, my story is pretty similar to Charlie's, but the difference is that I think I had read a little bit about it it was either Newsweek magazine or Time magazine, about the story of George Lucas building his Skywalker Ranch facility. And they had, I think, maybe a 1 or 2 line mention that, now he's working on with Steven Spielberg on Raiders of a Lost Ark. And I was thinking, well, what the heck does that mean? And as the weeks went by, and I saw the TV commercial, I thought, well, it sure looks like there's a lot of interesting things going on, and how can you go wrong with George Lucas and Steven Spielberg? I didn't yet know that John Williams had done the score. However, every summer it was time to go visit my grandparents in eastern Pennsylvania, and that's the same situation that there was when I first saw Star Wars. I went and saw it near my grandmother's place in the Wyoming Valley Mall Cinema, which was this tiny little dumpy little multiplex that had 3 screens, and it was terrible. But I saw Star Wars there, and it changed my life. So it doesn't really matter. The screen was big enough, it was relatively clean. But So this summer, the summer of '81, I was in Pennsylvania and again went to the Wyoming Mall Cinema and saw Raiders of the Lost Ark the first weekend. And it was such a surprise, such a wonderful surprise, that the same energy and joy and fun was in this movie that was almost completely unlike anything I'd ever seen. Because I wasn't a fan of the the '40s serials and stuff at that
Sure.
point. I think I'd seen some of the Flash Gordon ones, but I hadn't seen any of the sort of generic adventure ones that this was emulating. So it was such a new experience, but it was also familiar because it had the same sort of joy and energy that Star Wars did,
Yes, it
but in a
did.
completely different vein, which was wonderful.
I mean, one of the things that what struck me was obviously, like you guys, this wasn't my genre. I'm like, is it a Western? I was much more interested in the future and science fiction, and we'd been going, like Charlie, you astutely pointed out, we've been going through this renaissance of science fiction beginning, I would say, in '76, Logan's Run, but that doesn't really count.
Sure. It does. It absolutely does.
Well, I mean, that was the first movie that I was anticipating because as a Star Trek fan, I saw that the ads. I was 9, and this giant epic science fiction movie came out. And when I went and saw it, I mean, I loved it. I love Logan's Run. But then the next year, Star Wars came out and literally, obviously, changed all of our lives. But then after that, like Charlie, you pointed out, you had Superman the movie. Then you had all the Star Wars ripoffs that were coming out. And then by the time you get to '79, Alien, which was as equally new, and I was blown away by Alien in a different way than Star Wars, but still, the 1-2 punch of those movies over the course of 2 years completely exploded what I think genre cinema could be. And all the other peripheral, the lesser movies, whether it's Dawn of the Dead or Phantasm, then we got the Black Hole, and of course Star Trek the Motion Picture, but it was still all sci-fi and horror to a certain extent. And this movie was dealing with genres that I was never really a fan of growing up. I wasn't a particular. I came to westerns later. I was like, cowboys. I want to watch Wagon Trains to the Stars. I don't want to watch the Old West. So this milieu was not something I was at all excited about. But what was really interesting, and I wonder if you guys could speak to this, when Raiders opens and the dissolve from the Paramount Mountain into South America, and it says South America, what, 1936? 38?
36. 36.
Is it?
Yeah, because Temple of Doom's 35, right?
Yeah.
So the music, the music, it was the ominous score, and it was so. I love the music, and I love the almost silhouette of the camera going through, propelling you into the jungle, and it was so, like, you're immediately sort of sucked in, like, what is happening here?
And you never see Indy's face.
No, you never see Andy's face. You don't know what's going on. And I was immediately, like, leaning forward in my chair. And then, of course, what happens. And then when Harrison Ford comes out, I don't think, I use this on the thumbnail. Let me just put the thumbnail up right here. There's the Robservations thumbnail. Here's the moment when he first appears out of the shadows. And I think it's certainly one of the greatest introduction moments, because we'd seen Han Solo in 2 movies, and to have him come out looking very different than Han Solo, but maybe even cooler than Han Solo ever looked.
The great thing is sort of the counter programming of his fanfare there. He's introduced like a villain. He absolutely is. So you
even with the music too, the fanfare. That's a really good point, man.
Yeah, you kind of don't really know whose side this guy is on, and I actually think that's good for the entire run of the movies, because he's not necessarily a good guy. He's an honorable guy, but as Belloc says later, our methods are not as different as you suppose.
Right.
So Indy is merely occasionally in the right, but he's still robbing graves.
Right.
Well, and also you get a sense that he's very smart because he had his back to Barranca, right? When he pulled out the gun, and he just heard the click, and that little nod, like the little tilt of the head, he's on it. And
Barranca, one of the characters named for streets in the Los Angeles area, among several in this script.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Did you do a Renegade commentary for this, Darren?
I sure did.
All right, I'll take a look.
Barranca, Ravenwood.
Uh-huh.
Those are streets off of Laurel Canyon.
Oh, good to know. But yeah, I just thought like in that moment he was just he just won us over, even though he was a shadowy reflection of what a good guy would be. He was still a badass, and he came out there just owning the screen, owning the movie, owning the audience. He just came out owning, and I love that moment so much because of that.
And then it just goes on. That whole opening sequence, what I love about it is it shows just how good he is at his job. Yes. Like, he really knows his shit. And you've got Cepito, Alfred Molina there, who's wanting to tread in. Let's go in.
Right in, yeah.
Where angels fear to tread. Like, let's do it. And he's always stopping and going, stay out of the light. It's
Indy's main weapon that he carries with him is his brain, because he has knowledge. He has done the research, the reading. He knows all the people who have gone after this in the past, and he knows what to expect, usually, which is amazing.
And had it been Belloc going in first, he would have just allowed Cepito to go right in, or Cepito go. Is this Tipo or Cepito? I feel like there's two different pronunciations in the movie. It's
the funny thing is, in the end credits, it's Tipo.
Right.
But I think Harrison Ford just sort of, adios, Cepito.
Yeah, that's it.
He didn't remember the name.
Yeah. But no, Belloc would have allowed to just go into his death.
That's also great because he doesn't really know these guys.
Yeah.
He probably just met him that day.
And I think also we would be remiss if we did not mention the absolute command of cinematic language. I think Spielberg, people talk about like Amadeus, Mozart was born a savant. Spielberg's command and understanding of it was innate. He was teaching himself when he was a teenager making movies. But my God, after Jaws, after Close Encounters, after 1941, after the Sugarland Express and everything he did in TV, the way he shoots coverage in this film and the way he moves the camera, it is virtuosic. I mean, it's just, is that a word? It's just it's an amazing. You cannot help but be entranced by the cinematic language on display. I mean, my God, everything about it, the photography in it. It's just a masterful. It's a Charlie disappeared. It's a masterclass of filmmaking.
Absolutely. Look, his facility with storytelling and visual language is absolutely unmatched. That's the thing that most people don't realize. Looking at his films today, which are fairly more complex and not as subtle as they used to be. The direction in Raiders is particularly good because you don't notice it at all. You don't notice these tricks that he's playing on you, that he's pulling you into and telling the story just bit by tiny little bit as he brings you along. One of the most amazing sequences is one shot, basically, with a couple cutaways. The one shot after the government meeting in the
it's funny that you mention this, Darren, because I actually have it queued up.
Well, lovely.
I don't know if I can't really play it because I'll get demonetized, but it is, just talk about it because it's.
Well, the great thing is we start off. We are in Indiana Jones's living room.
I'm going to put before you start. I'm going to put this shot. There's an article about this. I'm going to put it in the live chat. So you guys, as Darren is talking about it, you can go to this article and watch this shot. So it's in the live chat now. So you can actually watch it as Darren talks about it. But it's what's called a oneer.
A oneer. We start at Indy going to his door, opening the door. There is Marcus Brody. You did it, didn't you? They want you to go for it, and then we follow them both through the front hall and into the main room, all in one shot. And the characters' relationship to each other changes a little bit. The camera moves slightly over, so we recompose for another setup. They're talking back to forth. Indy does a crossover, and we counter in the other direction, and we're constantly moving along with these two actors that are relating to each other in different ways throughout the scene. And it's so subtle and so smooth, you don't know that you're not seeing cuts. You are cutting in your mind.
It's
you
a
are looking
brilliant,
back and forth.
brilliantly blocked out sequence.
It's actually more amazing. It's more amazing than you know, because there's a whole chunk of that oneer before Indy opens the door that has not been released. And there's a bit with Indy and his student.
One of the girls, yeah.
Yeah, who's basically wearing a robe. She's like, she's coming down the stairway or whatever. She's wearing a robe, and then Indy and her are talking about grading papers. I don't know what they're talking about, but and then there's the knock at the door, and she's kind of like, come on, Indy, it's our time to be together, basically. And Indy kind of promises, yeah, whatever, and then he yanks the robe off of her, leaving her in like her negligee. And so when Indy's like tying his robe, that's because he just took the robe off of his student assistant. So, but that was all part of the oneer. It's like that was a different part of the hallway that then followed into the door. So that like the masterful just filmmaking is just, it never stops in Raiders. It starts and it never stops the entirety of that film, and that's why it's just so awe-inspiring.
And I think part of that is Spielberg, planning out so precisely what he wanted, so that he could get the film done quicker, more efficiently, and didn't have to do all these setups that would cost more time and money.
Well, that's something to remember, because 1941 went way over budget, and it was sort of a debacle. And part of the deal that apparently Lucas and Spielberg made with George was that you got to stay on time and on budget, man.
Yep.
Because I dealt with Empire Strikes Back, and we're not going to do that again. So you got to.
We're not going to do a 1942 on this one.
Yeah. But that was something else, and I think you're absolutely right. The part of the reason this movie I think works is because the immediacy of what Spielberg was doing bleeds into the whole pacing of it. I mean, it was so beautifully shot. You saw the storyboards that Jim Steranko drew, and key art. Yeah,
not storyboards, but key art. Beautiful paintings.
Right, they weren't storyboards. That's right, but they were like beautiful paintings. So I think it was really just a masterfully mounted production all the way around.
Yeah.
So, but now let me ask you guys this. I mean, what was so interesting was after that whole opening sequence, which was just, you're sitting there, literally, you were as breathless as Indiana Jones was watching it. And one of my favorite, again, you already been introduced to Indiana Jones, but the introduction of Renee Belloc is one of the great villain entrances in any movie. Yeah. After you've gone this breathless, he tumbles down and he sits up, and there you have the quick cuts to the Jovitos with the arrows pointed at his head. And then there's a guy in this white linen suit, with his accent.
No,
once again, we see there's nothing
right before that, where we see Barranca fall, and he has the spikes in his back.
Yeah.
That had been set up before the temple. That had been so lovely set up, with Satipo spitting out the poison and setting up this danger that we can find later.
Now, it's brilliant screenwriting and everything about it, but it was so great because I remember thinking, we've just watched this guy who's clearly great at his job. He really knows what to do, and this other asshole waltzes in with his fucking linen suit in the middle of the goddamn jungle, and hand it over. Once again, we see there's nothing you can possess that I cannot take away.
His lovely clean pants.
And perhaps you could have won them if only you spoke Jovitos. I mean, it's so you immediately, and he's dressed in white, you immediately just have all the hatred in the world. There you go. All the hatred in the world for this guy. And this is just masterful filmmaking, masterful scripting, and Spielberg just, he knew exactly what to do for maximum effect in every shot and every moment in this movie.
But it's not just hatred for Belloc. It's big respect, because we've seen how good Indy is. And if this guy could outsmart him, he must really be smart.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And what a great way to open a film. I mean, it's one of the great film openings of all time. But so, go ahead, Charlie.
No, it's also really amusing because, until Indy runs away and jumps on the vine, that's the first time we hear the Raiders theme.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. Like, that's like this, again, it was like we're joining him on the adventure now because we love the music, we love him, we get it all. But after all that, and when he gets on the plane with Jacques and he's up in the air, and then the introduction of the snake, like this kind of like last minute, oh, by the way, he has this fear of snakes. It's like that whole opening is just so jam-packed with just so many great character bits that resonate for 3 other movies beyond this one. It's just, it's a masterclass, really, in setting up a character.
And even Jacques, one of my like the way they used to movies in the olden times, every character, no matter how long they were in a film, they were fully developed. And there was Jacques fishing off one of the pontoons of his plane, and he's looking up. He's clearly caught something on the line. He's looking up. He's seeing Indy and the Jovitos running after Indy, and he's like, I need this fish. And he's looking, and finally he's just like, and lets it go. And it's just another added detail where you know everything you need to know about Jacques, and then it's, that's just my pet snake Reggie. It's like it's just, you think it's yet another threat in the movie. It's just so wonderfully done.
With the introduction of the Indiana Jones theme, though, it's also lovely editing and lovely music scoring, because we have the action and the music working hand in hand together. Because when he grabs that vine, we hear bum ba-dum bum bum ba-dum splash right in the middle of that. And it's perfectly timed, and it fits in with the music. It's as if the splash is a musical instrument. And it's so well orchestrated, both visually and orally, that it's perfect. It works perfectly. And you just don't find that.
And the theme doesn't really fully complete until the plane takes off.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Amazing. And, it's great because the pacing of this film, I mean, these sequences were breathtaking. And even the use of compressed angles or using certain lenses, like I love the trick of the Jovitos behind him. And you think that they're right behind him, and then you see the distance because he's playing with lenses there and focal lengths. And, I mean, it's so brilliantly done. It's just such a masterclass in filmmaking, and that whole opening. I would be hard pressed. I don't think there's been a Bond opening that has been as effective all the way around as there is. I mean, I could think of it as a pre-title sequence, even though it's not. But that's exactly what they wanted to make it. That was part of the inspiration for making this, of course, because Spielberg wanted to do a Bond movie. When they were talking about this, on that beach in Hawaii, right after Star Wars opened, Spielberg wanted to do he wanted to do an Indiana Jones movie. He wanted to do a James Bond movie, and Lucas said, well, I'm working on something that's kind of like that, but maybe we can figure out something. And that was, at the time, Indiana Smith, that he was working on with Philip Kaufman. But the whole inspiration for that was due to them wanting to do something like a James Bond film, but also bringing in the elements of these, the cheap serials from the 40s and 50s. No, I mean, and Charlie, was this, for me, I didn't even know that I needed this movie. I remember thinking to myself, like, I expected, by the end of this sequence, when the plane flies off, and then you go back, you go into the college, and then you see the juxtaposition of now Professor Jones is addressing this class, and it becomes almost a different movie. where a girl's written "I love you" on her eyelids, and I love when he stops for neo meaning lithic, and then he leans into it, and suddenly it becomes this mirth-filled kind of comedy of the Professor Jones, his alter ego Dr. Jones, the professor at this college, and then I'm like, it's just as entertaining. Yeah. It's a totally different vibe. And there's the whole joke with the apple. The guy sheepishly leaves the apple there, right. And then you meet Denholm Elliott, you meet Marcus Brody, and he grabs the apple. And there's all of this just beautifully written business going on, and even that, every single scene in this movie is doing things that are wildly entertaining, no matter what it is, and that's what I think is so great when you go back and you watch this film. Every bit, even when there's no action, there is something going on that is either defining character or is providing an extra little jolt of entertainment value. It's just so beautifully conceived, and you don't see this anymore.
Well, what I love about the whole opening kind of first act is basically we see Indy's street smarts in the jungle, basically, but we see that he's got like that kind of knowledge. And then obviously in the temple as well. But then when he gets to and he's also got the muscle, right? He's like a rough and tumble hero. Then he gets to the university, and then we see he's an academic. Then we see him with Marion, and he's a ladies' man. Then he gets to Cairo, and he's kind of a worldly. He has friends all over the world. So we keep getting these chapters of Indy's backstory in real time while we're watching the film. And he is kind of like an old-fashioned Buckaroo Banzai. It's like he's got so many different facets, and get far more grounded than Buckaroo, obviously. But I love that there's always something new to learn with Indy in Raiders, and I think the sequels and the prequel kind of like do their own way of kind of like bringing out new facets of Indy. But I feel like Raiders is just so good at keeping Indy fresh the entire time that we're always discovering things with him. He's always got surprises going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, even then, another great that I just love so much is when Indy gets on the Pan American plane to finally go off on the mission, and there's just the cutaway to the Nazi, reading the paper. And, he looks down, and it's...
Yeah, Dennis Muren.
Dennis Muren, and it's from ILM. It's just these techniques that they used were this amazing shorthand and so self-assured, and again the maximum entertainment value, and the music. I mean, God, the score in this film, like Darren, you pointed out, it's almost like the perfect confluence of visual and scoring together. It's as if John Williams had watched this movie 100 times before he wrote the score. It's just a masterclass in putting a film together.
I love the elements that are grabbed from those adventure serials. I mean, cutaways like Dennis Muren hiding behind the paper. That's a well-used trope from those early movies. And the map. Oh. When we're looking at the red line being traced on the map, that is absolutely one of those elements that are from the 40s and 50s serials, but it's handled in a brand new way. It's everything old is new again, and it's nothing that our generation had seen before.
Right.
Certainly in that this shiny new package,
where it's superimposed with the plane flying and the clouds and what I loved about it was, you'd go to some destination where the plane would have to land and refuel, and then the dot is there, and then it starts again. Yeah. I mean, they didn't have to do that, but they did it, and there was something about that made it even better. You're seeing just how long the journey to Nepal took,
Well, it gives us a little geography lesson as we go, so
right.
That's all good.
Because we're not, we don't know, Americans don't know where anything is, so it really helped us out. Sure. And then, of course, then you get to Nepal. And another thing I really love about this film is that I feel like ILM's work, whether it was a matte painting, their model work, they really were able to integrate the visual effects with the whole look and feel. It didn't feel like you were watching something that was incongruous with the live action material. It all worked together as one piece. It was all... again, it was like a virtuoso concert that you were watching, and
I believe this was the first time that ILM worked for someone other than George. I mean, they're still working for George, but they're working for Spielberg for the first time.
Right.
And so this is sort of a new experience for them because it's not an in-house thing.
Right, because
that same year, ILM did Dragon Slayer.
That's right. That's right.
Before today, I went back to my old Cinefexes to look at the Raiders Cinefex, and in that issue, Dragon Slayer is on the front and the back cover. Raiders didn't even get the back cover.
Right.
Just to go to show how, not that they thought little of Raiders, but Raiders hadn't quite made its mark yet. Obviously, when they decided to put
it was an unknown quantity.
Yeah.
I was just going to grab. I won't.
Okay.
I have to look through. But
way,
yes,
Rob. By the way, why do you have a Temple of Doom poster behind you?
Because I sold my Raiders poster.
Oh, okay.
You know, I you know what? Back in the day, needed money. I sold my beautiful mint condition Raiders poster. But the Temple of Doom posters, this is the advance, is one of my most favorite posters of all time.
It's great.
It's a beautiful poster.
Yeah, so here I'll show you. This is the actual original. The whole composition. I know it's in a protective sheath here because I need to one day get it framed. But I bought this poster in 1984. It's still in mint condition, and this poster could not have been. If adventure has a name, it must be Indiana Jones. I mean, come on. When that came out, wow, you know. So I just put it up because I had it, and it just makes me every time I look at it, I'm like, God damn it.
I guess it should.
Side story. Do you remember? I don't know if you were in LA at the time, but when Temple of Doom opened in the LA calendar section.
Yeah, I wasn't.
They had a huge. Well, other cities might have had it as well, but they had in the calendar. They had a huge 2-page ad that was mostly white background with that indie cut out against it.
Yep.
And all it said was Wednesday. It didn't say anything else.
Nice.
It's like that's how badass. You know, they knew that, like the swagger of the marketing on that was just like Wednesday indie. That's all you need to know.
Well, what's funny too is another thing that people nowadays, because we're so inundated, we know so much about movies. This movie, like Star Wars, became a cultural event. Everybody was talking about it. Every person was talking about it. Parents, kids, it was everywhere, and it was one of those groundswell things where you weren't a human being if you hadn't seen Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, it became this amazing, seismic cultural shift in Hollywood as much as even, and it really cemented Lucas and Spielberg as, I mean, they've done stuff individually, but that team up was like, it rocked pop culture to the core, and that was something that you don't I don't know if that would ever happen again. It was really exciting.
And also the summer of '81 was interesting because I think people might have anticipated Superman 2 or For Your Eyes Only or other movies being the big, monster hits that summer. And this kind of it didn't come out of nowhere, but it definitely kind of tiptoed in and then took over.
It definitely took people by surprise, I think.
Yeah.
No, it really did. Now, there's people firing in questions and things via Super Chats. First, Jack sends in a Super Chat and says, Lazarica's featurettes are the best bonus features any source material could ever hope to have. I've watched his Dangerous Days documentary almost as many times as I've watched Blade Runner itself.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Stubble McShave says, the whole intro section is a mini version of the movie and a promise of what the movie is going to be. He'll have adventures where he visits exotic locations, solves riddles, avoids traps, gets the piece to finally have it taken away from him at the end. That's actually very, very true. And Julian M says, it is still strongly etched into my memory that first time seeing Raiders. I saw it at the Factoria Cinemas, where I saw it, with my Uncle Tim. It was there, so yeah, which is great. I don't know, like we keep losing Charlie, but I'm glad he keeps coming back. I have a question from Willow that I'll wait till Charlie gets back and ask. Sends in a super chat, so thank you for that. And Charlie's back. So Charlie, we have a tip comes in from Willow Yang, one of the foundational members of this community. She says, I've never been to California, so I've never tried In-N-Out. John Campia is the first person I've heard diss their burgers. What is your opinion of In-N-Out, gentlemen?
John Campea is wrong.
Yes.
I,
I haven't lived in LA for about 4 years now, and the next time I go back to LA, I'm probably going to go to that In-N-Out right next to LAX just to get my In-N-Out fix, because I'm not saying it's the best burger I've ever had, but it's just such a comfortable sweater to put back on. It just feels so good.
Amazingly satisfying.
Yes.
there's the way they season the meat. I love In-N-Out Burger, and I'll tell you something. I've been going there since moved to California. The burgers always taste the same. They don't. You never go to an In-N-Out Burger and go, yeah, it wasn't very good. Yeah. Now, there's a lot of people that don't like In-N-Out fries. I love In-N-Out fries.
They're good.
Love them.
They are. If people like extra crispy fries, they're probably not for you.
Right.
But
you can ask for that.
Real.
You can ask for that, right? Yeah.
You can, but I don't like to put them out at all.
But that's the whole In-N-Out secret menu, right? It's like
I don't subscribe to that. I think that everyone deserves to order from the regular menu. Don't do any special things, because the stuff on the regular menu is just fine.
Yeah, but the mustard fried burgers are so good, dude. Come on now. The secret Willow, there's a secret menu at In-N-Out, and if you know it, you can ask for various things, and they give you, one of them is mustard fried, where they put a little mustard in when they grill the burger, and my God. But I get it mustard fried with no pickle.
4x4.
That's my favorite.
4x4.
A 4x4 is 4 meat patties and 4 pieces of cheese.
It's insane. I've never had one, but I've seen one being ordered.
Oh, dude, that's my jam. 4x4. Yeah.
Wow, look at that 4x4. Someday, Jennifer. Someday.
Movie Finobi writes in and says, I took my dad to see this at AMC last weekend because they're opening up. People are showing Raiders. And I took Mom to see A Quiet Place too. It's so great. Happy weekend, everyone. First time in the theater since February of 2020. Well, Movie Finobi, I'm glad you're back. Have you guys both been back to theaters yet, movie theaters?
I went back for a special screening. A friend of mine bought out a theater for one of those individual screening things, and that was fun.
What was it like for you to go back? Was it weird?
No, it wasn't weird. It was just, oh, well, this is nice. I remember this. It was good.
Have you been back, Charlie?
I went to Film Quest Film Festival in Utah a couple weeks ago, and that wasn't like a real traditional theater. It was more of a music venue that they converted into a theater. So that's as close as I've gotten. I haven't been to a proper real movie theater since I saw Underwater.
Wow.
And I saw that because it was directed by Will Eubank, who was my cinematographer on Crave. So it's like I had to support, right? I had to go, cheer him on. So that's the last time I set foot in a real, corporate movie theater.
Now, one of the things that I wanted to ask you both, I mean, both of you work obviously in the industry. How much we were kind of in this sweet spot where we kept seeing these amazing visions between 77 and I would say 85. More often than not, we were getting these incredibly diverse, when I say diverse, I mean different kinds of movies that were pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Charlie, you mentioned Dragon Slayer, ILM perfecting Go Motion that they had begun in with the Tauntauns and Empire, stop motion animation, adding motion blur. When we saw the Vermithrax pejorative, the dragon in Dragon Slayer, it was like, oh my God. How much did Raiders, and of course every other thing that was coming out, influence your desire to work in the entertainment business?
You want to go first, Charlie?
I'm having some connection problems. Why don't you go, Darren, and I'll hopefully join in after you.
It was absolutely a strong influence because I had been seeing the same names from Star Wars and an additional bunch of names as well. But as it turns out, after all these years of working in the industry, I got to work with several of the key players from Raiders. Les Dilley, who was the art director, he was my mentor for, 6 years. And Ed Verreau, who was the storyboard artist on it, and is the I believe he's the first mate on the submarine in that little montage when the submarine is going. He was the storyboard artist, and he was an art director that worked for Les, and I met him on there, and he's become one of my great friends over the years. And so many of these other people who worked on Raiders and the later movies that I've gotten to know. And it was because of their work that I learned that there were jobs that I could do in the movie business. And that reading about them, learning about these, the things that you go through to make this kind of movie that, entertained me so much that I wanted to know how to become a part of that. And that, the one, it's kind of like a 5 punch of Star Wars, Close Encounters, Superman, Star Trek, Alien, Raiders, all of these movies that happened in that really short amount of time, like, 4 or 5 years, really sort of pounded it into my head that I needed to be part of this. And I'm so lucky to have gotten to work with so many of these people and connect with others of my kind that were also drawn to this, this devil's tower of an industry.
Well, and also another thing that was happening at the same time is that there was all this peripheral material, such as sketchbooks and blueprints and making of tomes, and the behind the scenes Cinefex magazine, which came out in 1980. And how was all of this done? And we could see there was documentaries like the making of Star Wars and things that didn't really exist before, and suddenly it portrayed these movies as something that, it wasn't just magic, it was made by people.
Yeah.
And I think that was another hugely influential aspect of all this. As we were growing up, we were at this very impressionable age, going from being kids to moving into our teenage years. And it basically, all of this, because we were not the kind of people that just watch movies. You had to get the book. You had to get the soundtrack. You got the novelization. And when they reprinted the novelization with like red foil, it's like, no, I need the original novelization. I don't want the reprint. And then maybe you're like, oh, I need all the reprints just to have them.
And during the great, powerful studio era, all of these jobs were not only hidden, but they would never talk about anything behind the scenes. There was no B-roll of people behind the scenes. There was maybe some staged, screenings that the stars would show up to, but that was the only behind the scenes stuff that they would allow. So there was no way to learn this stuff, and the unions would keep a very tight control over who talked about things, specifically, in the makeup areas and the effects areas. But it was only the sort of democratization of the film worker jobs that happened in the late 70s that sort of opened this up, and the information of how the movies were made became a commodity, and it was able to sort of expand that reach of this pop culture thing, and bring in other aspects of the audience who may or may not have enjoyed the movies as much as everybody else.
And for me, it was kind of like it's all that, and just in immersing myself in Cinefex and Cinemagic magazine, and all of like these kind of like sort of like textbooks basically of like, you can do this too, or at least you can learn about it. But then for me, it was the 1-2 punch of SPFX making the Empire Strikes Back documentary.
Amazing.
Because they showed snow speeders blowing up, like these miniatures like coming down, exploding. And I thought, I want to do that.
And they showed Ben Burtt hitting that guy wire.
Yeah,
that was like, that was amazing. But I went out and bought the snowspeeder model kit, and that's when I started building models, and just the tactile relationship, the smell of the paint and the glue, all that stuff was really intoxicating. And then, so it was that documentary, and then just reading about Raiders, that I started building models that weren't Star Wars.
Oh, he'll come back.
He'll be back, and better than ever.
But no, I think Charlie makes a good point. I mean, that was once you realize, like, I had built models before Star Wars had come out, but seeing, okay, wait, Charlie, so you're saying that's why you built models. Please continue.
Yeah, so I went out and I got a DC-3 or C-47 because of the one that goes from Nepal to Cairo, right? And Raiders.
Right.
And I started building that, and then off of that, I started imagining a story, and I came up with my own Raiders sequel that was called Secrets of the Forbidden Island, and I drew the logo like secrets like Raiders and of the Forbidden Island, none of this Indiana Jones and the stuff,
Right.
and I came up with a story because I was building the model, and I thought, what adventure could this plane take our characters to? And, of course, I didn't have the money or the resources to go do it, like those kids who made the Raiders recreation, whatever. But I still felt like it just triggered the imagination that even if I didn't go all the way to finish something, at least I was playing with the toys that got me thinking about it.
It was creativity fuel.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think that's still, I mean, nowadays, we've got all the technology that exists. I mean, you can literally, if you want to make a fan film, you can recreate something that looks pretty close to what they're doing in Hollywood. But we didn't have that. I was making Super 8 movies where you'd film something and have to wait a week to get the film back to see if you properly exposed it. And you'd be reading Cinemagic magazine. They're like, here's how to do like a green screen, or make a stop motion armature out of these things. And
here's the thing that I think is funny. Back when it was really, really hard to do this stuff at home, you had the excuse that it was really, really hard to do this at home. So your goals were way bigger, and the whole sort of potentialist art movement of planning stuff that is really, really cool that you're going to do someday. And it's only because, well, I don't really have equipment. I don't really have a bunch of friends to do this with, and every excuse. But your ideas are still huge, and you could do that someday. I think the problem is these days is that it's way too easy to do this stuff, and so you find out sooner that you can't do it. Some people will sort of start out with big bold ideas, and they'll find out within a couple days that, oh well, this isn't really going to turn out the way I wanted to, and then they give up. The great thing is that we never gave up, because we always had other excuses why it didn't happen. It wasn't because of us. That's just a little theory that I've been thinking about. That is interesting. We didn't know that we didn't know. If that makes sense.
I love the term potentialist art. I think that is so absolutely spot on. Yeah.
That was coined by my old friend Ed Marsh, who worked on the Abyss with me.
Yes. Who also made an amazing documentary about the Abyss.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite documentaries, by the way, ever. And it could never get made. Nobody would ever allow that to get made today.
No, Jim Cameron certainly wouldn't.
Yeah, no. Matthew De Fritas says, does Paramount or Disney now own the indie rights? Well, I think the rights are owned by Disney, but Paramount has distribution.
I think that's how it is.
On the first 4.
Right.
Yeah.
And 5 is free and clear to Disney, I believe, from what I get.
Now, since you brought it up, obviously in the last couple of days, we've seen some interesting things. Now, Charlie, you have heard that the Indiana Jones 5 script could be good?
I don't know what you're talking about.
All right. Well, you've got a picture here of Toby Jones and Indiana Jones. Toby and Indy Jones. Here are Toby Jones and Indiana Jones, and you can see Harrison Ford does have tracking markers on his face and his jacket, and obviously he's dressed in a classic look. They've been shooting at a castle in England, and there's also a train. Here is a train that actually, it's interesting. There is the Nazi markings on this train. Now, if you look in the top corner of this picture, there is a statue that a lot of fans are speculating about. And up in the top left-hand corner, and people are saying it is this statue, which is a statue of Kronos, the god Kronos. And people are talking about how maybe there's time travel involved. I don't know if that's the case, but I think
wasn't Kronos a Titan?
yes. So not a god.
He's
Yes,
not
a
a
Titan.
god.
Not a, he was. What does God need with Indiana Jones? But yeah, no, you're right. So I was wondering if you gentlemen might speculate. Like I've said that I think whatever this movie is, obviously we know that there's Nazis in it because we've seen pictures. Even the train company that provided the train put out a video of them and their Nazi train going through the English countryside. And a lot of people, my theory, by the way, I know nothing about the screenplay. I know nothing about the story at all. But I would assume, since there's Nazis involved, that this will be sort of the culmination. We know, as I said before, in the Indiana Jones universe, the supernatural exists. God is real. We've got the Holy Grail. We've got the Sankara stones. So there are powers beyond human understanding that exist. And my theory is something the Nazis did back in the day that maybe Indiana Jones might have been involved with that we didn't know about is manifesting itself in the 60s or the 70s whenever this movie takes place. And who knows what it is, but what do you guys think?
Well, by the way, I didn't mean to be rude with you, Rob, earlier. I'll just say this: I am uncharacteristically optimistic.
That's good. Okay, well, that's good.
I'll pause there. But Darren seems like he's chomping at the bit to open.
Not really.
Okay. Whenever I see your mouth open, Darren, I think, you're about to give us the wisdom. So
No.
Okay.
I mean, I would ask you guys, what do you think? Obviously, of Harrison Ford is now pushing. I think he turns 80 in July.
Yeah,
he's gonna be. So he's 79 years old. I think we couldn't ask for him. He can't look better than he looks now. Seeing pictures of him cycling in England, he's got guns. He's got bulging veins. He's in as good a shape you could expect any human being to be at his age.
He can kick all of our asses. This guy, this 80-year-old could just put us all on the mat.
He survives plane crashes for real.
Yeah.
So, what is your level of anticipation for Indiana Jones 5?
I'm trying to keep it low. I'm really trying to not know too much about anything, and because I don't want to go through the Crystal Skull thing again, because I was mildly excited for it before, and I don't want to do that again. So I'm just going to say, you know what? I really hope it's good, and I want to be surprised. I want to be pleasantly surprised at the movie theater with another Indiana Jones movie. But I don't want to go through the shock and disappointment of Crystal Skull because it's terrible.
Were you really shocked by it, Darren? Were you shocked?
I was shocked at how bad it was. Yeah, absolutely. It was just because you would think that everything was the correct mix of things. You would think from all the clues that we had, but it just nothing gelled for me. I know some people like it, not me.
I agree with you. I think it's a misfire on almost every level, but to me it's a fascinating misfire. I mean, I look at it and to me it's a great cautionary tale, which I still can't. I don't understand how it misfired so badly. I mean, it had all the elements.
I know in one of the analyses on the interwebs, there is some talk as to the tone and the style of the film. We're supposed to be more in the vein of a 50s sci-fi movie, right?
Yes.
Where the procedural elements are different and they are laid out differently, and the story has to be told in that manner, as opposed to the 1940s serial moment by moment storytelling.
That's interesting.
But and I think that's kind of valid, or at least the content of the movie should have been portrayed that way. But I don't know if Indiana Jones lends himself to other styles of movie making, because it kind of doesn't work that way with that character.
I mean,
I feel like the farther away he's gotten from that mercenary, grave robber, just darker character from Raiders and Temple of Doom. Yeah. Once we found out he had a dad and a childhood and a life, which is, by the way, all delightful stuff. I mean, I love seeing the chemistry
It's
between
fun.
Gordon and Connery. It's fun. It's wonderful. The journey of a father and a son to kind of rekindle their relationship, and the Holy Grail being what does that. It's beautiful. I love it. But it's not the Indy that I really kind of bonded with in those first two movies. So I feel like so Crystal Skull was that doubled because of Marianne Mutt.
Yeah.
Who to me is like, that's the only clunker in the movie for me. I mean, let me rephrase that. The movie has a lot of problems. I have grown to accept it in a way that I didn't when I first saw it. Like, I've watched it a few times, and I think Harrison Ford is actually really doing his best to keep it together. I mean, I do think you can't slight him because he's there to work. He's there to really deliver Indy. I think there's some really great visual moments throughout it. I think there were some ideas that were there that didn't maybe quite pay off exactly. It's just Mutt was the only thing that I thought was a total misfire. But I am optimistic that with the new movie, since we haven't heard of Shia LaBeouf being in it, maybe Karen Allen has a cameo. Maybe it's like less family now that we no longer have Henry Jones involved. Maybe he'll get back to kind of like lean, mean action machine that it kind of began with. I would love to see that, even though it's an older Indy. Who knows what he's capable of, and who knows what the story is. I mean, just seeing like this era of this opening Nazi castle train sequence that we've seen glimpses of. I mean, it almost seems already darker. Like it's toward the end of World War II. It definitely has more of a Gestapo SS vibe to these Nazis, not just German soldiers like we had in Raiders, right? So it's just kind of like it may be a totally different flavor of Indy, a darker flavor that we haven't seen in a while, and that I'm up for. Like that, I'd love to see.
Mads Mikkelsen, I love this idea. I think you're right. I mean, to me, first of all, James Mangold if Spielberg's not directing, I think of all the directors working today, if you go back and you look at what Mangold did with Logan or Ford v Ferrari or 3:10 to Yuma, was that him too? Or, yeah, he definitely has a handle on this kind of character, and I'm really hoping that's what we're going to get, because of all the movies that are, I desperately want this movie to be great. Bring John Williams. This could be the last score John Williams ever writes. Yeah. And I'm hoping that we're really going to get something special.
I just want to see an Indiana Jones that actually has lived through these other movies that we've seen him in. Because I think at some point you can't play the I don't believe in magic or superstitious things. You can't play that again after we know he's lived through all this stuff and he's seen it happen.
His skepticism reboots with each movie.
It does, and that's just maddening to me. I want him to be as smart as he should be and know that there are other stuff happening in the universe that people don't necessarily understand. And I think with him armed with that and him having an extremely opened mind to these other events that happened to him previously, that I think that'll make a more interesting and truthful character.
Yeah, I agree. He didn't close his eyes every time something mystical happened, So he might not have seen the power of God come out of the Ark of the Covenant and smite the Nazis, but he certainly saw
heard it, and he
saw it, and he felt it, and it's just.
That whole trait of Indy's, from Temple of Doom to Raiders, it's okay. That doesn't bother me. That he saw Sankara stones do their glow or whatever, and then Raiders, he doesn't necessarily believe that the Ark is a real thing, like a magical property or whatever. It's Raiders to Last Crusade. That's like, what? You don't believe in the Holy Grail, even though you saw the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah. Even though you're in the Venice catacombs and you see the Ark on the wall, like to remind you that you saw the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah. It's just like things like that. I don't fully buy. I think I froze again.
No, you're here. We see you.
Okay. All right.
You're here. Well, I agree. And I think that was, look, I loved Temple of Doom. When Temple of Doom came out, I loved it because, it was a throwback and there was a lot of like funny humor. Like a lot of people didn't like Willie Scott, but I did because I saw her character as being from movies that I recognized, and I'm like, okay, she's was that character, and even the way it opened, which is it's very different from Raiders, but a virtuoso sequence aside from the reverse. Running the girls getting back up in reverse, which is kind of goofy.
but that is completely in the style of Busby Berkeley.
No, it is. And it's funny to me. Ever since I saw that in 1984, I always thought to myself, man, I really wish Spielberg would direct a musical. And
Right.
lo and behold, here in 2021, we're finally going to get to see his first musical.
But someone explained that to me within the past few years, that the hundreds of dancing girls doing all those impossible kicks and reverse kicks and things like that. That's all in Willie Scott's mind. She goes into the smoke, and she thinks that the show she's in is this big production number.
Wow, I love that.
And it makes perfect sense. So it's that time period. So that is what she would imagine it to be. So that whole production number behind the set is in her mind, and then when she reemerges again, it's back to the dinky little stage show, which is so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically that whole set is like a TARDIS behind Willie. So it's like, that's all fantasy,
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way that, even if it's Willie's imagination or our imagination, it's all fantasy.
Right.
And the fact that the film opens with the totally different splashy title treatment behind her.
That she is in front of, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the only time we've seen that kind of departure from the titling of the films, which I'm kind of curious how the new one's going to go, because I don't know if you've seen it. There are already fan recreations of what the titles could be. And what I saw of like the dark Nazi castle had the orange italic Temple of Doom, Germany, 19 whatever. I wonder if that might creep back in somehow, because I do think, look, Temple of Doom is a hugely controversial film. I think probably now more than ever, which is weird, because I feel like people didn't care for it much when it first came out. Then there was like this kind of reappraisal of it. Where, no, it's a really good action movie, and it's really beautifully crafted. The score is amazing, cinematography is phenomenal. They appreciated like how dark and more simple this sort of was. And now I feel like in the last 5 years, it's increasingly gone back to no, it's a very problematic film. It's racist. It has all these problems, and so I look at it as an example of craft, as an example of Spielberg at the height of his superpowers as a director. The script, the racism in it, I can't deny. It's just I do look at it from different points of view, and I wonder if the new film will be a little bit more like maybe smarter in embracing those kind of like lean, mean attributes I'm talking about without offending people, except Nazis.
Yeah.
We can offend them all day long. I don't care about them.
It's interesting because I think most of that sort of negative spin came from Spielberg himself, because after the backlash and the creation of PG-13 because of that movie, I think he was very very disappointed at the reaction from a big section of the populace, that this was too horrific for kids. Come on, I mean it's all presented in a surreal environment. It's almost cartoony, the violence, and it's an adventure story. You're not supposed to take it seriously. You're not supposed to think that these bad guys are real and have families and all that. It's just a story. And I think that Spielberg took that a little bit too much to heart. And maybe it's, feedback from his wife, Willie Scott, who, sort of said, well, that shoot had tons of problems, and it, Stephen. I don't know. But it's really sad that he sort of backtracked on his own gut feeling when he was directing the movie. That I think his original gut feeling was spot on, and he got the tone that movie should have been. It's supposed to be a little darker. It's supposed to be different than Raiders. It's another adventure. It's not the same thing over again. And go ahead.
No, I totally agree with that. And that's when I saw it. You can't recreate Raiders. You bring the character in for another adventure. And I felt like it was set up as not being the same kind of adventure right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And I have always enjoyed it for, like, Charlie, you pointed out, the score is great. It's beautiful to look at. It's very interesting. And there's a lot of different kinds of humor. And it very much, more than Raiders, resembles the serials that it was taken from. You know, it felt like more like a serial than even Raiders did.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, it is what it is, but I think it's a beautifully made film that has breathless action sequences. Like, I don't care what anyone says. I love when they fall out of the plane in the raft. I mean, I love that. That whole sequence, and it's one thing after another, after another, after another, you know, and it's so much fun.
Well, you know, Raiders getting nominated and winning, you know, plenty of Oscars, but getting nominated for Best Picture and I believe director. You know, that probably, you know, Temple of Doom had to be a come down after that. Like, when you think, wait, I went off and made a fun film, you know, on a lark with George, and we just made this movie together that was just a blast, and we just like powered through it, and it was just like making it up as we go. And then Temple of Doom comes out, and it didn't quite connect the same way. And again, after the heights of Raiders, I could see why Spielberg might have, you know, kind of turned his back on it. It's just weird because, to me, when he was doing, I can't remember which documentary it's in. It's in one of the, you know, the vintage ones, where he says, he's talking about how it's darker and more violent, and he says it's not called Indiana Jones and the Temple of Roses. You know, the warning is clearly marked on the box, and I think the whole PG-13 of it all was kind of like the wrong direction to take the conversation. And I think there are other aspects of Temple of Doom that are really worth discussing in terms of what was wrong about it. But I think that the violence and the gore or whatever, I was 13 when I saw it. I was fine. No,
it was awesome. Like when Mola Ram tears out that kid's heart, you know, and holds it up, and it's still beating and turns into flame. Come on, that was exactly what I wanted to see.
And he's still alive, by the way, right? So it's all, again, fantasy.
Yeah,
but
because it's mass hypnosis.
Yeah,
but I love Temple of Doom because it came out at the same time that I had my first job working for a drugstore, and I took my money, my first couple of paychecks, and I went over to Radio Shack and I bought a stereo cassette recorder that I could wear on my person. I could sling it behind me, and 2 microphones that I could wear on each shoulder. And Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was the first movie that I went into, and I recorded the whole damn thing.
You bootlegger.
And I listened to it over and over. Yes, my first steps as a bootlegger as a child. But honestly, listening to that in its full form, in its immediacy of a screening, was so much fun, and let me analyze it, you know, from an audio perspective, so much, and it sort of was one of those things that inspired me more. I originally wanted to be a sound guy. I wanted to do what Ben Burtt did, and so that was my original sort of push to get into the industry. And then I realized I didn't really want to do that. But the thing is, that is one of the things that did fuel my creativity and my thinking about how this stuff worked, and thinking about how I could participate in it. And I'm never going to forget that. And it was a meaningful part of my growing up.
Roberto's. Go ahead.
I have to say, my rig was nowhere near as impressive as yours, Darren. But I and I'm talking about, you know, recording devices, nothing else.
I understand.
The first time I recorded audio was for 1941, which is a hard film to just listen to because it's just screaming and explosions for like 90% of it. But it forces your imagination to revisualize stuff, right? And I started doing that. And the first time I went to a theater with a camera to record, I took a Super 8 camera in to the UA Capitol Theater in Glendale with my mom, by the way, to shoot the trailer for Revenge of the Jedi. So I'm in there with my GAF whatever Super 8 camera, and my mom put her arm up behind me to kind of block.
Oh my God.
And I was just rolling the Revenge trailer, and I think I have it still somewhere. So I got that home, and I would go back and forth, and like, who are those red guards? And what, you know, I kept going back frame by frame to the Jedi trailer.
Nice.
What we had to do when we were younger.
You kids these days.
Yeah. So spoiled.
Roberto Suarez sends in a tip and says, Raiders and Doom are from a different era in Spielberg's filmography. It was from a time when his films had, quote-unquote, balls.
Absolutely.
The backlash after Doom that led to the creation of the PG-13 rating scared him off somewhat. His movies have never had that edge again.
Absolutely on point.
I think Munich had edge. I think Munich was edge.
Yeah, but Munich isn't intended for his audience of that time. Munich is for a completely different audience.
Fair.
Minority Report.
I can understand the difference in tone for Munich because it's intended for adults.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, Schindler's List, certainly. Saving Private Ryan.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But you're right, different audience. Roberto goes on to say, what would you think of spinning off the franchise with an adult short round? He's been mentored by Indy and become an archaeologist and must go on an adventure, say, to find Indy, who is lost following the trail of Abner Ravenwood's failed expedition.
I love that.
I love that too, actually.
I mentioned this to friends probably like a year or two ago, when Indy 5 started becoming a real conversation again. My idea for a teaser trailer for not this Indy 5 they're making, but for my imagined Indy 5, the teaser trailer would not be about Indy at all. You wouldn't even know it was about Indy. It was about a man, probably in Hong Kong or Shanghai. We don't know yet, but he's a mercenary who has maybe a network of commandos or mercenaries that he works with who do various kind of like, black ops or whatever you want to call it. Like they do kind of like secret missions and things like that. And there's like this missing guy they've got to find. And so he sends the guys out to find him, and they drag this guy in, like he's been beaten to death or whatever. They drag him in, he's got a hat on, but we don't see him. And they raise, his head raises up, and it's 80-year-old Harrison Ford in the hat. And the mercenary goes, Dr. Jones? And he's like, Shorty? And that's the end of the trailer.
Oh my God.
I was like, I would love to have seen like that kind of adventure together.
Dude, I want to just see that trailer. I got chills when you gave me that.
Like in the 70s. Make it like a 70s movie.
Yeah. And it would be a full-on all-Asian cast, and have like Tony Leung or somebody.
Totally. Absolutely.
That'd be great. The Richard sends in a super chat and says, Aloha, gents. Thanks for being here. It is our honor. The Richard's one of my moderators, so thank you for that. Louis Terrazas says, I know what happens in Indy 5 and you hit it on the head, my boy. I don't know if you really do, Louis. Robbie Robinson, it's metaphysicals and Nazi aliens. Rob, that link is fucked. I was ready. I don't know what... you were talking about Louis coming on the show. I don't know. Do you think it's metaphysicals and Nazi aliens, you guys? Is it Iron Sky? Are there Nazis on the moon?
I think it's something that we cannot guess at.
Yeah.
I agree.
Sheriff Carl sends in a tip and says, what's better, In-N-Out or Our Dicks in Seattle? My favorite is Max Burger in Sweden. Also, Indy 4 sucks, but it does have Ray Winstone. He rules. Great show today, dudes.
No, he doesn't.
I like Ray
Especially
Winstone,
not.
but that
I like Ray
terrible.
Winstone. He's terrible in that movie.
That character is terrible. I saw someone online talking about, like, what if that had been Sala instead?
Yeah.
And Henry instead of John Hurt's character. And it's like, well, the family would have been back together. That would have been nice, but I don't want to see Sala be a triple agent or whatever, like doing the flip-flop twice.
Yeah.
I would hate Sala to put Indy and the rest through that. No.
Do you think we're going to see Sala in this movie? I mean, Denholm Elliott's no longer with us, but John Rhys Davies?
I would bet we may see...
I would not want to.
We might see Marion, because I don't know if you look at the spy photos, but Indy is wearing a wedding ring, so I'm wondering if that's going to come back in some form. But
Roberto Suarez says Stephen Yen as the adult short round. That could be good,
Maybe, yeah.
Now let's get to Last Crusade. What did you think of Last Crusade? Because I have to say, as much as I enjoy Sean Connery, I've loved Sean Connery my whole life. I thought he was a great choice to play Indy's father, but I did not like the way he was portrayed. I didn't like the way the character was written.
Yeah, he acted too stupid to be smart.
Yeah. I know. I mean, that's why I'm not, and I don't like what they did to Denholm Elliott. Marcus Brody and Sala were both turned into comedic sidekicks.
One of the main problems in my opinion, with Last Crusade, is that Henry Jones Sr. should have been able to finish that quest. They should have shot Indy, and Henry Jones should have gone through and gotten the Grail.
I like that.
I love that.
Because that would have fulfilled his character. It would have been a a great cue as to how smart he was. How
Man, now I want to go
capable
back
he
in time and
was.
rewrite the goddamn movie. I would have loved that, Darren.
And it would be a perfect, it'd be a perfect
he-
echo. It'd be a perfect echo of him saying, "I thought I lost you, boy."
Yes.
You know?
And it would be he that lets the Grail go to save his son.
I love
Wow.
That
That's almost
would have
too,
been
that's almost
it.
too good. It's almost too good because then we lose our main character as the protagonist for like a stretch.
Yes.
But he doesn't. But we lose.
beautiful.
Indiana Jones doesn't do shit at the end of Raiders either. He's tied to a post.
He tells Marion not to look at it. So like,
Yeah.
he does,
It's his brains that saves the day for them.
yeah. But I love that flip on Henry. Like that's great.
What a great idea.
Let's just stop there. Let's just end. That's the,
Sandy Q says, I became a historian. 99% of archaeology is done in the library, not the field, because of this movie. Raiders shaped my career. Jurassic Park validated it. Tearing up, thinking about it. This is a great stream.
Oh, good.
Well,
nice.
thank you, gentlemen, for being here. You know, I think what also is interesting, do you think, like when they made Crystal Skull, that they shouldn't have made it? Did too much time pass?
I think too much time passed between Temple of Doom and Last Crusade. I think like that initial idea of knocking them out like James Bond movies
Right.
would have been a better way to go. And then we probably wouldn't have been so beholden to having Harrison Ford play Indy the entire time. You know, you could recast. But because, again, Raiders being a Best Picture nominee, it started that kind of like the pedigree, a much, A+ pedigree with this franchise that I think maybe too much time passed before Last Crusade, but it was fine. It wasn't bad. Crystal Skull to me was it was basically like Rocky Balboa after Rocky V. It was like I'm happy to see the character again. I don't know if this was like the really compelling story to bring him back for, but I'm happy to see him again. And again, it's not a perfect movie, but I don't hate Crystal Skull like some people do. I recognize the problems, but I do think the time between the two definitely hurt it to some degree.
What about you, Darren?
I can't let go of my hatred for Crystal Skull. I think it should never have been made. I would have been fine with 3 Indiana Jones movies. I'm still fine with 3 Indiana Jones movies. I'd love for Indy 5 to change my mind, but I'm not counting on it.
But Darren, you'd be fine with 2 Star Wars movies.
Absolutely.
So would I.
2.5. 2.5.
Yeah, 2.5. The beginning and the end of Jedi. So 2.5. But what I find so interesting to me about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is that at the end of the movie, they don't really do anything. Like Indiana Jones doesn't get to interact with whatever. I mean, you could say like, look, they still had to get the Ark. They still had to open it up. Indy was there. And he does say to Marion, don't look at it. But what happens at the end of Crystal Skull is they don't even have to be there. It's almost like entirely inconsequential. They didn't do anything.
Well, plus, at the end of the movie, we have no freaking idea what's going on.
Right.
Nothing makes sense. Why are the other dimensional creatures? Why were they there? Why does there need to be a bunch of them? Why do they combine into one? What the heck is going on? Why do they have all this treasure there? What is going on?
They're
Nothing
collectors.
makes sense.
They're collectors. They say that in the movie.
No, they don't. Did
Yeah,
they?
they do.
When?
Yeah. That's why when Ray Winstone was going in like stuff in his pockets, like I can't remember which character it was, but like basically they were collecting like human culture and human artifacts and things like that.
Then
You should watch it again.
Why was their plan so stupid?
Well, you got to talk to someone else about that. That's a different department, but yeah.
Louis Terrasas asks, wait a minute. So why is Darren high on Indy 5? Indy's
I'm
80.
not. Why am I high on Indy 5?
I think he's being funny.
Did you smoke 80? Did you smoke Indy 5?
Oh, look, I think the main actor in that film could smoke us all under the table. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I look at it this way. I don't have a problem with a character like Indiana Jones. Like, I have a sense that we've only seen Indiana Jones. These spy pictures are from the opening of the film where he's going to be de-aged anyway. I would imagine that the Indy that we meet, he's not going to be wearing that outfit. He's going to be appropriate. He's going to be more of a professor. Maybe he's retired or whatever. And what we're seeing is something that he took part of that kicked off events that 40 or 50 years later have now come to pass, 40 years later. And he's going to be recruited.
I buy that, but do we know that's from the opening of the film? I mean, it seems obvious, but maybe not.
No, I would just assume that it is because he's being de-aged. So maybe it's from the middle of the movie. It's a flashback or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
but I mean, think
we're guessing that he's being de-aged. Maybe he has a big alien head now. We don't know.
I mean, there were the photos of his stunt double on the motorcycle wearing the black Nazi outfit, and then the stunt double wearing the Harrison Ford mask, which is both creepy and awesome. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah.
So obviously he goes in disguise. He perhaps escapes from the castle to get to the train. I mean, who knows? We're just piecing this together with like little morsels. But I would rather not try to figure it out, frankly. I love the
figure it
glimpse.
out.
Nothing wrong, but I don't want to figure it out.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know anything more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's I don't want to know either. I wish I could just go in cold.
I wonder if the video game is going to tie into it, the Bethesda game that they're making right now.
The Empire of Evil, that people are like, it's the game, people.
Yeah. That one's about Disney, though.
The joke you made, but they're in front of the camera. What was that joke you made once?
Oh my God, that was a long time ago at our LAX restaurant show.
Yes, that's right. The that Mojo directed. That was very funny. Well, so I don't know. I think I guess to wrap it up, to celebrate this, what do you think is the lasting legacy of Raiders, and what does it mean now? You know, audiences are going to rediscover this movie. What's so great about Raiders is because it's a period piece, you can watch it now, and I think it's lost none of its power. And I think its charm and its storytelling, it hasn't aged a day. But what do you think it means to audiences today?
I think the funny thing is that it's longer ago to when Indiana Jones or Raiders of the Lost Ark first came out. It's longer between then and now than the movie serials were from when Raiders came out. So we are basically now, we're not looking at adaptations or riffs on the movie serials. We're looking at riffs on Raiders of the Lost Ark. So it's that old Xerox thing, you know, it's a copy of a copy. So I think that unless they are in the new film, unless they are getting inspiration from different sources to bring something new into the mix, to give us a slightly different feeling in the film, but still a good feeling and a fulfilling feeling. I think unless that happens, then it's just looking at a bad copy of something.
Interesting.
I think that, again, it's another bit from the old documentary, the making of documentary, where George Lucas says, you know, I just want to see this movie. Yeah. And that kind of joy of just wanting to make a movie that you want to see and you want to enjoy. I feel like people are chasing the success of a film they didn't make. And I don't mean that with the Raiders movies necessarily. I mean that other films of today, modern filmmaking, you have all of these kids who grew up to become studio filmmakers, and they want to recapture the joy that they had watching Raiders and Star Wars and whatever. But I feel like there's such a difference between what Spielberg and Lucas did with Raiders in terms of, like, yes, making a popcorn film that people are going to love, but something that they truly, truly enjoy themselves.
Right.
And I feel like we've lost a lot of that in the films that have come since.
They're copying the forms and not the content.
Right. And they're not even like copy, and you shouldn't even try to copy the experience. Hopefully each one is a new experience, because I feel like that's when we go into a theater, we want to be surprised. And when you go in and it's like literally Indy chasing an artifact that was stolen from him from a white suited bad guy, and then we catch up with Indy back at the university, and then he gets a mission to go on a biblical Judeo-Christian artifact quest.
Yeah.
And he goes after that to find a clue that'll lead him to the other clue, to the other item.
Yeah.
And then he follows that path for a while, and then he ends up on an epic desert chase.
Right.
What movie am I describing?
Yeah, you're describing 1 or 3.
Yeah. And that's where I would love to get away from the template, you know?
Right.
The template of doom.
Ricky B sends in a super chat and says, I could listen to Darren and Charlie for hours and days. Listening to their ideas off the cuff explains why they have so many IMDb credits to their names.
Well, that's awful.
But you should come join our Thursday night Zoom that we do.
And Magic K says, celebrating Superman Day and Indiana Jones' 40th anniversary today, it's a glorious day for being a nerd. I agree with that. But in our case, it's a glorious day to be a nerd every day.
I prefer the term aficionado.
We do say imagination connoisseurs around here.
Yeah, I don't, but you go right ahead.
Thanks, Darren. Even though you are. Louis Terrazas comes back and says, Rob, I'm being serious. If it's aliens, you owe me a 4x4. I'll buy you a 4x4. I also just meant, how are you all excited for Indy 5? Spielberg said he didn't like the script.
Where? When did he say that?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard that today.
That would be like breaking news across the interwebs if that was a true thing.
Yeah.
That'd be huge.
And it could have been an earlier script. I think James Mangold. Look, I've got faith in James Mangold. Of all the people in Hollywood,
James Mangold is a good filmmaker.
Yeah, and I think he's also got the right balance of what he's going to bring to this. You know, I think his films are all about machismo. You know, he's made a lot of powerful movies about dudes, and I think he's gonna do well. I think he's gonna do well. Cardinal Sin says, great show today, Rob. I love your guests and this chat. Well, thank you for that, Cardinal Sin. Roberto Suarez goes on to say, who will be the next Indiana Jones type character? Tomb Raider, National Treasure, and Dirk Pitt haven't had the cinematic impact of Indiana Jones. Is the pulp science hero no longer relevant?
I'm sure we've seen different stabs at it between The Shadow, Phantom, Rocketeer, The Mummy to some degree. I mean, we've seen that kind of retro 30s, 40s serial adventure, post-indie adventure franchises trying to get launched, and they don't. And I don't know what that is. And frankly, I'm really curious to see how Indy 5 does in today's market, because you're dealing with a near 80-year-old main character, title character, and who knows what the other characters are going to bring to it on like the team, you know, what they're going to bring to it. But I'm really curious to see how today's youth-oriented culture embraces it or not. I mean, we're all going to go see it. Everyone like over 30 is going to go see it. But
40.
Hey,
honestly, I think the difference is in the writing and the acting. I think that the character needs to be written with, you know, there's the word that you like to use all the time, verisimilitude, to a real person who has these facets to their personality, right? But it needs to feel real. It needs to feel like this is a real person who responds in a certain way to certain stimuli, and who can think themselves out of a situation. If they can't think themselves out, then they can punch their way out. If they can't punch their way out, then they slink their way out through some kind of trickery. But it has to feel real. And I think that's why these other characters sort of haven't hit, because there's something missing. They are ciphers. They are just there to fill the position of this character, and there's no other reason for them to be there.
And then I was just thinking about going back to like the retro 40s, 30s era heroes. Like, well, you could argue Captain America, the first Avenger, tapped into that world in that time. But I think everyone knew that we were going to get out of that time period pretty quickly, and there was a bigger universe that soon Cap would be in present day. So that was allowed as sort of a prequel that was already designed into the package, you know, in a way. I just don't know if today, I think to do a modern version of a Raiders or an indie style character, you would just have to set it in the 60s or 70s or whatever, and not go back that far, because I just don't think. Again, I'm strictly talking about kids. I don't mean like us. I mean the kids today probably wouldn't engage in an old timey movie. regardless of how state of the art it was in terms of visual effects or how sexy the new characters were or whatever. We've seen it time and time again. People do not connect after a certain period of time.
No, I completely agree with you. I think that's going to be really interesting to see because, look, I think that we live in a world where younger people now, TikTok, YouTube, whatever they're engaged with, movies themselves do not hold the place in youth culture that they held when we were young. Because really the only game in town for us as imagination connoisseurs was movies, because video games were very, very primitive. We didn't have social media. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have any of that technology. It didn't exist. So movies were the pinnacle of imagination, seeing flights of fancy.
Just because you didn't like my Pong fan fiction, you don't need to bring that into it.
I won't. But I mean, I think, but you guys are right. I just wonder if people are going to connect to this, and I think it could be the ultimate example of, so Lucasfilm and Disney have this IP. I'm very surprised, by the way, that they didn't reboot Indiana Jones with a new actor, a young actor. I think it's great that they're going in this direction, that we're going to get one last hurrah with Indiana Jones. And you've got people, I mean, I have to say, Frank Marshall posted a picture of him and Kathleen Kennedy on the set of Temple of Doom. And he was wearing an Indy 2 shirt. And I loved seeing that. I was like, you forget that people are like, they are making, I don't understand the vitriol. I mean, I understand the vitriol against Kathleen Kennedy, but people forget, she's been producing these movies for 40 years as well. I mean, she produced E.T. 39 years ago. It's like, to see Frank Marshall and Kathleen Kennedy back on set, I kind of was like, because they both were heroes of mine. Hell, Frank Marshall is in Raiders. He gets conked on the head on the flying wing. And it's just, I find that this is, I'm very excited for this. But like you said, are people going to connect? Is this movie going to find an audience?
When does the video game come out?
I don't know.
Because if that comes out before the movie, that might warm up kids to going to see it. I don't know. I don't know what the timing is, because they just announced the game, like a year or two ago. I forgot the timeline of it. But if the game comes out and gets younger people interested in Indiana Jones, and it's a compelling story that maybe even ties in to the new movie in some form, that could be a good bridge to get people going to fight.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm curious, like, what was the thought process of Disney to make an Indiana Jones 5 with a 79-year-old Indy?
What other option do they have at this point?
Well, yeah, they could have recast or rebooted the whole thing.
The problem is that the franchise is already dead. Crystal Skull killed the franchise.
Yes.
So the only thing that can bring it back is a resurgence of interest in Harrison Ford, Indiana Jones, and that old feeling of watching him be this character.
Do you think that's even possible?
Possible. I hope it is. I really do. And I think that, James Mangold has an opportunity to show his quality. And to be able to pull this out of the fire, because I think it's a really tough thing. And when you first hear the idea, well, we have a new Indiana Jones movie with no Steven Spielberg and no George Lucas, what are we going to do? Well, we'll see. The training wheels are off, and there is an opportunity to come up with something different and equally as fun. So we'll see. I think a lot is hinging on that. And I think if we're ever going to see a reboot of the character with a different, younger actor, perhaps, and let's say prequels, this needs to do it, because I don't think there's any other opportunity. I think a reboot at this point would be really saying that the studio has no other ideas and they are really grasping at straws. And I think that would not go well for the film itself. So,
I mean, I would be interested in seeing if they could come up with a Disney Plus series that takes place between the end of Young Indiana Jones Chronicles and before Temple of Doom.
Yeah.
With a new actor playing Indy, like the New Adventures of Indiana Jones, or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And then you get an audience, kind of like acclimated to a new actor playing Indy, And if they love them, I mean, look, I think Disney Plus has a pretty great track record so far in the shows they've been putting out.
Yeah.
Both Star Wars and Marvel and everything else they're doing. So I would trust them to come up with something. If they do it, I think they would only do it if they could do it right.
And you could still bring in familiar characters like, you know, young Sala and Wuhan, the waiter in the Temple of Doom. Yeah. These other characters that, you know, are sort of ancillary, but they contribute to the whole world of Indy.
Yeah.
Louis Terraza says, yes, Rob, listen to Darren. This franchise is no good. I wouldn't have greenlit it, and I love Indy. I know you want the nostalgia, Robsta. No, I really don't. I mean, I like the idea of an aging. I've always been attracted to aging characters who are on their last hurrah, whether it's the Western, The Professionals, whether it's Unforgiven. You know, I always like older characters that are sort of more toward the end of their lives and seeing how they deal with their upcoming mortality and the legacy of their own lives. I think that's ripe for narrative exploration. I love that. Go ahead.
So it's like Indiana Jones and The Last Jedi, is what you're saying.
Well, that I didn't. I thought that The Last Jedi I didn't believe that Luke Skywalker would be the character that he is in Last Jedi. I mean, I did see
20,000 new people just jumped into this conversation suddenly. Like, I feel like the people watching just like suddenly, oh my God, Last Jedi. The bat signal went up for The Last Jedi. Now that everyone's like,
well, to me, what's interesting is Indiana Jones as a person. I don't like the idea that somebody at the end of I don't believe a guy like Indiana Jones is suddenly going to be embittered. I mean, maybe he had something bad happen in his life, but he still has a life where he's accomplished so much. And there is something like, I would rather see, okay, in Clint Eastwood's case in Unforgiven, he's a man he was drunk half the time. Like he says in Unforgiven, he didn't know what was going on. And this huge legend rose around him as this fearsome gunfighter. And all he's doing is he's like, okay, now I'm shoveling pig shit. And even he knows that I need to make right by these kids. And I've got this opportunity to tread on my old reputation, even though it's sort of undeserved, and maybe I can get some money and give these kids a better life. You know, and that's where it happens. But a character like Indiana Jones, I think, where are you now in life? I don't necessarily think everybody's going to be embittered. Like, I didn't believe Picard at all. I didn't believe Jean-Luc Picard, the character of Picard, would at all be the way he was portrayed in the series Picard. It didn't make sense to me. I'm like, give me a break, because people who've had a great life. You know, Buzz Aldrin is not walking around going, I hate my life now. You know, I landed on the moon when I was a young man and I haven't done anything as remarkable since. He's everywhere. He's enjoying being Buzz Aldrin.
Well, he is punching people out in public places.
Well, yeah, but they're telling him he didn't do it. They're saying you didn't do the greatest thing in your life that you did.
But maybe that is a track that Indiana Jones could deal with as well. You know, I think that there's one of two ways, I think, that the character could go. He could actually be old and bitter because he can't recapture the abilities and the adventures that he once had. And then there's the optimistic Indy who has seen all this stuff and can actually bring a fresh eye to something strange that's happening. A wise point of view that can help these youngsters get through this problem because of his great perspective on all these strange things that have happened in his life.
I mean, that's one thing I enjoyed about Crystal Skull, though, was his relationship, the brief relationship we saw with the students, like in the library. It's like he was still excited about archaeology. He was still wanted to impart that he loved it. He was still curious about it. And even though he was going to go off on these exotic adventures that we had seen in previous films and in that one, I still love that he seems to really enjoy his job, whether it's part-time. He still enjoys it.
Part-time.
Well, also, I mean, Indiana Jones is also a guy, as he's aged, he has to do things like probably believes in God. And he's probably content. I mean, he knows there's an afterlife. He knows there's a supernatural element to this planet that we don't understand.
Right.
And so he's going to have, I would say that in a way, it would be kind of like a Zen master, understanding like none of you people are ever going to see what I've seen. And I have real knowledge that you're never going to have. So I think, Charlie, you're right. I mean, I don't see him as being embittered at all. I think that he would be somebody that realizes we live in this wonderful, awe-inspiring universe, and I'm one of the only people that realizes just how awe-inspiring it really is.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
I tell you. Yes.
Wait, who's delivering that line? Which actor?
Yeah.
Roberto Suarez says, what about an animated series in the style of Paul Dini and Bruce Timm's Batman?
Well,
is it too late for something like that to bring in a new audience?
You've seen that kind of like fan-made animated indie. I like it. I think it's pretty cool. No, Darren?
I don't know. I think most of what I love about Indiana Jones is not the action stuff, is not the, Daredevil stunts and things like that. I really like Indy thinking through stuff, and you can't really do that in sort of a semi-anime kind of setting. And I don't know, it just doesn't hook me like the actual Indiana Jones does.
Do you think that on this one, on Indy 5, since they're obviously de-aging him, they're going to scan the hell out of Harrison Ford and come up with like the ultimate hero 35-year-old like avatar to use on future films?
God, I hope not.
You still need that voice, you still need that performance, you still need the soul of Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
But if they were to do an animated show where they could maybe borrow that to some degree to at least bring in a little more of a human connection, I'm not saying it's going to work. It probably won't. But I'm just kind of curious to see what is the future of Indiana Jones after 5.
Yeah, I think it has to be with another actor if they're going to continue that.
Yeah.
Or they need to go the short round route.
Which I'm up for. I like that. I'm
totally into that.
Plus, you'd think, like, with the calls for diversity and all of that, I think doing a short round series could be there's a Disney Plus series waiting to happen.
Yep.
And that's your pilot episode. They drag in Harrison Ford, and they do that because it would really be interesting to concentrate on, to spend a lot of time dealing with East Asian mythology and folklore. Right. Like, you could do a whole season with the Terracotta Warriors or whatever the hell you want to do. I mean, it could be really interesting.
Shorty, sit down. Let me tell you the secret of the blues.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, gentlemen, we've been here for almost 2 hours. It seemed like we've been talking for 10 minutes.
Just like that.
This has been a phenomenal stream. And I want to thank you both for being here. Is there anything you can tell us about what you're working on now? I know, Charlie, you've got a short film, Love Bite, that just played at a festival. Is there any way that people can see your new short?
It's still going to be on the festival circuit for a few more months. I can say I'll be in LA in September, October for Shriek Fest. It'll be playing at Shriek Fest in LA. So I hope to see a lot of the LA fam there when I come out for that. I think Carly and I will both come out for that. And aside from that, I've got an amazing documentary in the early stages. I hope gets the final green light and we can get going, and I can tell you about it. But if it happens, it's going to be one of the most amazing docs I've ever been a part of, and I'm really honored to be a part of it because it's crazy and it's amazing and it's going to be epic. And then I'm just trying to get my own next second feature off the ground. So that's kind of like what I'm working on, and hopefully by the end of the year, now that we're kind of like getting in the slightly post-COVID era, hopefully we'll start getting back to work. I mean, I'm still doing the behind-the-scenes stuff, but that's been really weird for the last 15 months. But it's been limping along, and it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I didn't think I'd ever go back to it, but I did. Obviously, we did the Hills Run Red for Scream Factory during COVID. Dave Parker and I going. It was fun. I mean, it was fun going back in and making special features again. So that was cool. So people could find you. I have your on your lower third. I've got your Twitter handle. So people can tweet at you at Twitter at Lazarica. Yeah. Now, what about? Oh,
really quick though, I want to say I tweeted out earlier 4 photos of my Raiders of the Lost Ark collection. I didn't bring out. That's why I busted your balls about Temple of Doom. I didn't bring out any of my Temple of Doom or Last Crusade stuff. It was purely Raiders, right? I had this whole table loaded with Raiders goodness, vintage, right, from the old days. And we had a crazy storm come through here between then and now. Like, it really was Wrath of God type stuff. It was insane. So I had to take everything inside. So I didn't reset it for this. So if you go to my Twitter, you can see the pictures of my Raiders collection that I pulled out of the garage just for today.
So it wasn't all wiped clean by the Wrath of God.
No, it wasn't.
Well, I did take something out, and Darren knows what this is. One of the things that got me collecting vintage figures, this was the first expensive action figure I bought from a company, Toys McCoy, from almost 20 years ago. And this is still, I love this figure. Maybe the face sculpt isn't what it should be, but I mean, it is an amazing figure as far as vintage figures go. It even comes with a very, very heavy, if I can get it out of here without dropping it.
It's got the idol head in there.
Yeah, the idol head is here. I'm trying to get it out. Here it is. And it comes with the idol head. And
Right.
This is what made me start buying vintage figures. This thing, I think it's 20 years old. I think so.
I think
Maybe.
it might even be more than that.
It might be older than, yeah, and it's a really great figure. But I know Sideshow has made figures and Hot Toys have made figures. I mean, Indiana Jones has been figured up for a long time. But I just thought I would bring that out to show it.
Nothing else has come close.
It is true.
Really quick, do you guys care that he basically wears the same costume over decades worth of storytelling? Does that bother you? It doesn't bother me at all, but I've noticed people mentioning that. Why is he wearing the same gear, like, decades later?
Well, I would say it's his work uniform. He's got this utilitarian work uniform that like, look, we've seen him in tuxedos, we've seen him teaching in tweed sport coats, and he doesn't wear it all the time. That's like, it's his utilitarian work uniform.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I've always seen it.
House painters wear the same thing to work every day.
Over decades?
Sure.
By the way,
Well-
I'm playing devil's advocate here. I love the costume. I think it's amazing. I never want to see him do anything else. But I have noticed that, okay, so in Last Crusade, he had the same thing, but he wore a tie. Like, at least
Right.
there was that slight action figure variation. Temple of Doom, he had the sleeve ripped off. Great.
Yeah.
Okay, at least it's the same thing. So what's going to be the new one? And so far from the photo we've seen, he has like one half of his shirt hanging out.
Look,
I think
wouldn't
that's de-aging. I think that's from the opening sequence.
I wouldn't put any credence in anything we're seeing that's leaked this early. I think that it's merely there to throw us off the track. There may be elements that are being used, but I think they're doing this on purpose to screw with us. I really do.
I love it.
Chris says the Indiana Jones series is all about fighting against a gigantic, seemingly unstoppable enemy where anyone else would quit. But Indy never gives up.
I
agree with that.
That's valid to a certain extent. I think that the fact that he doesn't give up is why he does succeed. Absolutely. And that his resilience may not be always there, but even on the edge of exhaustion and death, he still manages to eke out a success. So I think that is one of the major character traits that he has that we love.
I completely agree.
I agree.
Darth Plato says, what happened to Star Wars original cast was akin to advertising a Beatles reunion, but the Beatles don't appear on stage at the same time, and Lennon shows up scowling and yelling at the audience and flipping everyone off. Maybe that's not too far from the truth.
I'd go see that.
Yeah, I would see it too. So I guess, what are your final thoughts on this, the 40th anniversary, the 40th birthday of Temple of Doom, of Raiders of the Lost Ark opening, and the introduction of the character of Indiana Jones into pop culture? I mean, he's endured for 40 plus years. We're going to see a new film coming out. What does he mean to you?
I think that Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Indiana Jones films played an important part in my fandom and my growing up and my learning about the industry that I wanted to be in. And the great thing was that all of these were different than everything else that was in theaters. I think it was that sort of breath of fresh air that kept me going back, and the fact that it wasn't like Star Wars, but it was as enjoyable as Star Wars. It was as enjoyable as any of these other genre films, and that it dealt with subjects that we didn't really know about. We hadn't really explored. I mean, I didn't know the history of the Ark of the Covenant. I'll tell you, after I saw the movie, I went to the library and I looked it up, and I learned all this sort of stuff about the actual Ark of the Covenant. And that was fascinating. And that sort of inspired me to, try to be smarter about things and learn. And I hope that it did that for a lot of other people. I think it probably did. But I think that the character himself is inspirational in that, as we talked about before, that he doesn't quit. He is smart. He is capable. He is worthy of having fans and worthy of being assigned these difficult tasks. I think if there's one thing that's lacking in popular culture at the moment is characters that are worthy of being liked and that have capabilities that are laudable and are emulatable. I think that is incredibly necessary, and we just aren't finding it these days because I think there's a tendency to not want to make people feel bad about themselves. I think it's exactly the opposite. I think that seeing someone successful at what they try to do is incredibly inspiring and uplifting. And I think that we need it. We need it more than ever now.
And I also think it's all that is absolutely true. And beyond that, it's that Indy is vulnerable. He makes mistakes. He is rough around the edges. And he gets his ass kicked like all the time. And I appreciate that he's not a Superman. He's not a superhero. The scene during the truck chase in Raiders when the German shoots him in the arm, I remember the audience gasping out loud because our guy, who's basically us in the movie, got shot in the arm. And that was like a serious moment that we didn't see in any of the previous films. I mean, he gets beat up pretty bad, but like getting shot in the arm, that squibbed his whip, like hit the camera basically. That was a pretty powerful moment. I did a long write-up on Raiders at 40 today on my Facebook, and just the one little story I'll share is, in 1981, when I was in junior high, I was a really bad student. I was not a good student at all. So I had to go to summer school. And the summer school I had to go to was a couple cities away. It wasn't close to home. And each day it was like a half day of school each day, I had like 3 hours to kill before my mom came off of her job to come pick me up and take me home, right? So I would go to the Alex Theater in Glendale. Not every day, but maybe 2 or 3 times a week during summer school for the whatever it was, the 4 or 5 weeks of summer school. And I watched Raiders over and over and over again. And that was my summer school. Nice. Like that was where I learned so much about just absorbing what's in the frame, how it's cut, how it's scored, the performances. Raiders is a film school, within a 2-hour span. It's incredible. And if you can just absorb the decisions that are made across every department in that film, I think you would learn so much about Spielbergian level filmmaking. That is just like you say, he's like Amadeus. It's like he's kind of like a once in a 1,000 years talent. And when you can absorb a film like Raiders that so perfectly distills all that, there's so much to learn. I enjoyed learning. Like that's the movie that really got me interested in editing. Like before that, editing was like this kind of like invisible art. I didn't know what it was. Oh, there's some guys to cut film together, whatever. That was the film I realized, oh, there's a reason why we cut to that shot here and then go back to that shot again, and then why it's this length and not that length. That Raiders was just a master class in every craft, but editing in particular, I really, really got a lot out of that film.
Oh, I completely agree. Well, gentlemen, on that note, you've been here for 2 hours. I want to thank you for graciously giving of your time on a Saturday.
Yeah. I just want to say, if people want to argue with me on Twitter, I'm at Darren Doc. It's just with one R.
They can see you. That's right below your head. You can't see that, but your Twitter handle has been above.
I can't see it.
It's been above you the whole time, or below you.
And you can find me on the Inglorious Trexperts podcast with Mark Altman, and the 4:30 movie with Mark and Ashley A. Miller and Steve Melching, where we talk about other movies. So look for me there, and I hope to see you on the interwebs someday.
What about you, Charlie? Where can people find you other than Twitter? Facebook?
Facebook, Instagram, usual spots. Hey, Clubhouse now, by the way, for like all the cool kids out there. Yeah.
Is it still cool though? Is Clubhouse still cool?
It's not. It's a wretched hive of scum and villainy. It's not good. But I'm there, and I'm in like the they for the last couple months they've had this thing called Fincher Fridays, and they invited me to be a panelist on the Alien 3 one, which I did. It was a lot of fun, actually.
That's cool.
And they just did 7 this last Friday. So Fincher is wrapping up, and I suggested they go with Man Mondays because we talk about Michael Mann a lot in the 7 room. So there are still pockets of interesting bits of coolness on Clubhouse, but most of it's a shit show.
Stubble McShave says, before I let you go, Indy is a very proactive character with medium competence. Could be.
I mean, sure. I don't know. He's extraordinarily competent when it comes to archaeology and like knowing that part of it. Maybe not so much in how to fly a plane or land a plane, but you know.
When he leaves to get the Ark and it's being taken by a truck, he doesn't know how he's going to do it. He just knows he's going to make it up as he goes along, but he's going to get that damn Ark.
And he brings along his shaving stuff. Stubble McShave. So.
He brought his bow tie to India for a Temple of Doom. So like he had a suit ready to go, his jacket ready to go. all in that little bag. He has so much stuff in there.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so very much for being here. And you are imagination connoisseurs par excellence, the two of you.
It was fun to hang out in the Robservatory.
Yeah, welcome to the Robservatory, and you're welcome back anytime. And I'm sure the audience dug it. We had a great audience here, so thank you both.
Thank you.
All right.
See you Thursday.
Well, that was a great chat, gents. I will see you later. I want to thank Darren and Charlie for coming. What a great chat. Well, I think I'm going to leave that there. We won't do any letters today, but I got a lot of letters. I'll come back tomorrow, and we will do letters. This was our extravaganza, our celebration of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Its 40th anniversary. It came out June 12th, 1981, 40 years ago today. I want to thank everybody that supported this channel with super chats and tips. Thank you very much, as always. And please, if you like this show, like it, subscribe, all those things. Tell your friends, share it. I want to thank my moderating staff. Joshua Levesque is here. Darren Seeley is here. Louise X. Sparrow is here. I don't want to miss anybody. The Richard, obviously, was here. Brian Hepburn is here. If I missed anybody else, I can't see who is here because I can't go back that far in the chat. But I want to thank all of the wrenches that make the community so delightful to be a part of. And thank all of you, and I especially want to thank all the members today. We had a members-only chat. You can become a member of this channel and join us for our bi-weekly Zoom calls. It's always great to see you. You can support the channel for as minimum as $1 a month if you want. And then we have these Zoom chats where you can talk to me and see each other and interact, and that was a lot of fun too. So thank you for that. I will be back with Midnight Metal tonight. We have producer Eric Olson, who produced the Motley Crue biopic The Dirt, coming with us tonight. He worked for Joel Silver at Silver Pictures for a long time. So Dave Parker and I are eager to host him on tonight's Midnight Metal. So please come join us for that. And on that note, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And I would say to all of you, may you find fortune and glory and have a better day.